Oh. What's up? This is Gino Ray, host of Native as I Can Be, Between Two Cultures. And we are getting ready to kick off episode number 4. Very happy to have you on board, listening wherever you may be, in your car, at your job, maybe soaking in a bathtub, or maybe you're on a flight across the United States. Could be any of those options, or none of them. But if you hear my voice, that means you are listening, in fact. So here we are, episode 4. Episode 3 was my chat with Kenji Nida, the Japanese reverend mixed martial artist. It's funny when I jot down notes for what I'm going to talk about in a podcast. I kind of stick to those and I kind of stray from those. And one of the things I had jotted down about Kenji that I didn't mention during the episode, Kenji spoke at my son's funeral, and there was a couple reasons for that. Number one, because we were close, and we had spent hours doing mixed martial arts, and him showing me all kinds of stuff. He's a straight genius at it. He's as good as anybody I had ever trained with up until that point. And when you train mixed martial arts with somebody, not every time, but a lot of times, you create a bond with that person. It's like wrestling with your kids. It's just like, it's just an unconventional way to get close to a person. And me and him had that. And when we worked at the same place, I would slip into his office and take up some of his time just chatting, just talking, and a lot of lunches, Mongolian barbecue and huge breakfast burritos, and food was always a big thing. And we'd make these trips to Fred Meyer and just splurge. And I remember Kenji always going for the double stuffed Oreos. I hope I'm not putting him on blast, but so we had a closeness, and the other reason for him speaking there is he's a reverend. I knew or suspected that, he would be able to, succinctly put a cap on the event. I knew he would be able to say something meaningful, and it would be about my son's death, but it would be about, a bigger picture, a grander scheme. And he was the only one of my people, I think, to speak at my son's funeral. I don't know. That was 3 years ago. I don't quite remember. Maybe I should, but so there was, and we are not now as close as we were, and I will shoulder the blame for that, because one of my biggest regrets, if not the biggest regret I have in life, is that, so for the first 5 years of my son being alive, I didn't drink. Well, I did right after he was born, and things happened and I didn't for 5 years. And that 5th year, I started drinking again, and I drank for the last 2 years of his life. Most of the time, it didn't interfere with me having time with him or how I interacted with him, and it did sometimes. I didn't drink when he was around, and I had said I wouldn't drink the night before he was around, and I didn't stick to that. Always. And some of those times his mom, Fanya, knew about, and sometimes she didn't. So, and if anybody knows me, drinking was a thing. So what I was getting at there is part of the reason me and Kenji didn't stay close is because once I started drinking again, there is a lot of shame that comes with drinking, at least the way I did. And I'm not saying the guy that has a beer after work should have anything to be ashamed of, but the way I did it and the sneaking around and the isolating and all that, there was a lot of shame to it, and I didn't want him to know because I respected him so much, and he had only known me as a sober person. So I pulled back from him and from a lot of people while I was doing my thing. Then when my son passed away, I was drinking like there was no tomorrow, and most of the time hoping there was no tomorrow. When my son was gone, I pretty much didn't want to be here anymore. And again, that's the same scenario. I was drinking so much that I didn't want him to know, or many people to know, though most everybody knew. So there was some shame, and even though he has a social work background and being a pastor or a reverend or whatever it is, he would have been an ideal person to talk to while I was going through the grieving process and the loss, and I didn't talk to him. I disappeared. I disappeared I moved from Boise about a month after Bams passed away, and I moved here to Portland where there's more family, and it was a good move for me, but I turned my back on Boise and all the people in it, and that's another thing I struggle with. But I look at where I'm at now, and I haven't drank in, I don't know, maybe 2 years, or probably I think 2 years, coming up on it. And having another kid, and having an 11-year-old stepson who means the world to me, who I think is one of the best kids I've ever come across, period. And I would think that if I didn't have the relationship that I have with him. And of course, Laura, who was with me through some of the really hard times. Not all of them. She kind of came in. She came in at the end because she helped me get to the end. So I'll put it like that. But so I look at where I'm at now, and I think this is one of the great comebacks, because I was at death's door, and some days pissed off that death didn't, answer when I was knocking. So that's kind of what I wanted to touch on with Kenji, that I missed that opportunity to talk about our relationship more as it was back then. But it was good talking to him, and it was pretty, some of those, there's people in your life that you can have gaps in the communication, and when you reconnect, it's just like it always was. My old roommate in LA and my friend, one of my best friends, Kobe Tayatano, it's the same with me and him. It's the same with me and my friend Alex Vega, and my best friend Shiva, but we don't ever really stop communicating. That's pretty much ongoing. But there's just people in your life, Benjamin Hare, that I don't want to leave anybody out, so I'm going to stop there. But I think you guys know what I'm talking about there. There's just always those people in your life that you can, the bond's always going to be there, I think, at least for me. So, anyways, on to this week's episode. This week's episode, I'm doing probably what I should have done in the first episode, which was just tell you a little bit about who I am. And by the way, the reason I'm doing this, it's not it's not strategy or it's not looking at this in hindsight or anything. So I've been working for the past couple weeks, sending some emails and some texts and trying to get some people on board to be guests. Not just and I'm reaching for people that I don't know and that I have never met or spoken to about being on a podcast, and as well as people I know. And I just basically couldn't get anybody this week. So I have people that are waiting to do it, but they basically couldn't do it today, which is the day I normally record. So so I'm going to go back in time a little bit and let people know a little bit about who I am, and hopefully if I can present myself a little better or a little deeper, hopefully that will push people that don't know who I am. Maybe once they have a better idea, they will keep listening. That's kind of the idea. And I think if I share a little bit who I am, it will, the podcast and why I'm doing it and what it's about will hopefully make more sense. So I'm not just some guy that picked a topic and said, I'm going to go do this. So yeah, this is who I am. I'm going to try and keep it short, because I can't imagine listening to just my voice for very long is really going to snag a bunch of listeners. So keeping it short, I'm going to hit the main points and talk about just some of the stuff in life that's made me who I am now. And then next week I'll have a guest and or guests, and we'll get back on track. So, yes, as I've said before many times, I'm Klamath Indian and white. I have a ton of siblings, and I mean maybe a literal ton of siblings. On my mom's side, I have an older brother. I have 2 older sisters, and I have a little brother who was adopted. We all have different dads. So we're all half siblings. And then, of course, my little brother with his mom is actually my first cousin. But he was adopted when I think he was 2. And he's our little brother. That's all there is to it. There's no second cousin about it. And actually, my oldest sister and oldest brother, they are actually full siblings. They have the same dad and mom. So, so what are 4 siblings on my mom's side. And then on my dad's side, there is my older sister, Leslie, who passed away. Let me think here. I think six other siblings besides her, who have different moms, same dad. So I got a lot of half siblings. We're talking like 11 half siblings out there. So maybe not quite a ton, maybe 3/4 of a ton of actual physical weight. Didn't and don't know the siblings on my dad's side that well. Some of them I've never met, I'm pretty sure, I think. Some of them live right up in Astoria, not too far from here, and I've went up there once to kick it. It's not close, and it's unfortunate, but that's just how families are wired. Everybody's family's different, and I lived with my mom and I lived with my sisters, on that side, and I'm close with them, and they've been there for me especially a lot, in ways that are, I owe a whole lot of where I am now to them. And my mom too, to everybody, but they have been there and saw me through some pretty tough times. And I don't know if I've done the same for them. But I hate using this phrase, and it's played out, but it is what it is. So, yeah, so I just didn't know. I just don't know my sister Leslie, I would get to see. She's my older sister. She was, I would always get to see her when I would come see my dad on spring breaks and Christmas vacation, things like that. And she was always super cool. She was very warm, and even though I didn't see her that often, she was just very welcoming to me. And she just seemed like, she was, I'm not exactly sure, maybe 14 years older, something like that. Just very cool. And she seemed she just had a lot of charisma, and she was beautiful. And her funeral was standing room only. I mean, she just impacted a lot of people in positive ways, and just a really good person. And it's a shame what drugs will do to somebody, because they took drugs. They took a good one, that day, and then sadly enough, the same thing happened to her son years later. So, just it's sad that what can happen and what drugs can do. And yeah, that's just another part of my family history. So, and then of course now I have Che and McCunny and Laura. That's my little squad here. And we got a good squad. Good, everybody's tight, and it's just good. I love where I'm at, and it's a million miles away from where I thought I would ever be. But at some point I took a wrong turn or a right turn, depending on how you look at it, and ended up here, and I'm pretty happy with it. So I grew up in Reedsport, Oregon, which is a little logging community down on the coast. About 5,000 people. It's mostly white, and it was okay. I don't know. It wasn't the worst place to grow up as a kid. It was pretty safe, but definitely kind of flannel and gun rack country, and not that there's anything wrong with those things. That's just what you saw a lot of, and that wasn't really me. It wasn't, and I didn't try too hard to squeeze into that mold, I don't think. But it was fine, and then we moved to Apache Junction, Arizona, which is a suburb of Phoenix, and that was a very big change. I actually got to go someplace and see some color, and you're talking about right when we moved down there, soon afterwards I started driving. So, I went from a small town to, if you're talking about that whole area, Phoenix, Scottsdale, Tempe, it's big, it's a big city. And I went from a small town, riding a bike everywhere, to having a car and driving all over this huge city. And, I did what teenagers do and dabbled in a little weed, and I think I did speed a couple times maybe, and tried acid once. And main thing was in junior high. Junior high, you could have looked, but not junior high, junior year. Or maybe it was sophomore year. I don't remember. But you probably could have looked at that moment and go and said, this is kind of where this could be a turning point for me, because I got into a very serious car accident driving home, drunk off my ass, by myself, thankfully. dozed off, fell asleep, passed out, whatever, right into a tree or a telephone pole or something like that. And had my nose kind of ripped partially off my face, and I lacerated my spleen. Was in the ICU for a couple days and ended up being in the hospital for 8, I think, 8 or 9. But pretty serious shit. And some people could look at that and never touch alcohol again. They would look at themselves and be like, man, I'm lucky to be alive. What was I thinking? I might have felt that way for a little bit, but once I started healing and getting back out, that all went away. And so I started drinking again, soon afterwards. And, this is not something I'm proud of, but that was not the last time I ever drove drunk either. So there you go. If there's an indication of what kind of troubles I'm going to have in my life, I think you can look at that as a strong indicator. So I graduated, joined the Army right after I got out, went into basic training. It was I think under a week after I graduated. I was flying out to St. Louis for basic training. Did my training at Fort Leonard Wood, finished that, went to Fort Gordon, Georgia, and then went to South Korea, where I spent the rest of the time. And I mean, South Korea, man, that's almost its own episode. Because when you're someone like me who has this love of the drink, and you put me in a place that has a bar every 5 feet, and you give me money to burn because you don't really have any bills, I was in trouble. I got in trouble literally my first weekend there, because I decided, you weren't supposed to go. I just got in trouble, and I got in trouble the whole time I was there, and I got in trouble the whole time I was in basic. So basic, I kind of threw my duffel bag at a drill sergeant the first day. So what was I thinking joining the Army with with my brain wired the way it is? I don't know. I don't know that I've ever been able to answer that question, but I had a lot of fun. I got to go to Korea. I was in Japan for a very brief amount of time. I got to go see some shit and meet people. I'd never been around somebody from the South, And when you hear somebody from the South go, well, yeah, man, I listen to DMX, Wu-Tang, Tribe Called Quest, and I was like, what? Like, I know you're messing with me, man, but I didn't realize at the time, like, the guy I was talking to was my age. He was 18, like. He should have been listening to Wu-Tang and DMX and those guys, but it just sounded really funny coming from someone from the South. But anyways, so when I got out of the Army, my mom had moved from Arizona to Idaho. So Idaho became my next stop, and I was there for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, something like that. And the first, the thing about that trip to Idaho, or that stay in Idaho, is it kind of really is what got me to LA, because that's where I met my friend Kobe. We used to work together, that I talked about earlier, or mentioned earlier. Excuse me. I just burped on the podcast. And he was making moves. He was going to go and be, and forgive me if I don't have the right terminology, but essentially an audio engineer. Was going to go to school down in Phoenix and then make his way over to LA, and that's what he was going to do. And he did it. And he's got great stories about it, but he completely accomplished what he set out to accomplish, which I totally admire. And the other significant part of Idaho, besides meeting some other good people like Alex Vega and David James. So I had a girlfriend, and we had our problems, me and her, and we broke up every other night of the week. She dumped me, I should say, every other night of the week, if I'm being honest. And one day I just got tired of it, and I called Pop, who was in Portland at the time, and I said, Pop, I got to get out of here. And he bought me a bus ticket, and I grabbed some clothes, and that was it. I went to Portland, took this long tour from Portland to LA to Phoenix to Vegas, back to LA, back to Portland, and then finally settled in LA. But that was all in a matter of a couple months. But there's another good Pop story in there too, by the way. But so anyways, yes, Kobe was in LA, and he was staying at families, and he wanted to get out, and so we went down there, and I lived there with him for a couple years, and I met my friend Shiva, who's one of my all-time best friends, still is, even though we are geographically distant. Kobe's also one of my best friends. Same story, just don't see each other every day, don't talk every day, but we're tight. And but as I am wont to do, as they say, I was partying a little too hard, drinking too much, getting a little out of control, so I decided to head back up to Idaho with my sister's help, and I was going to stay there with her, with the idea really in my head that I was just going to kind of calm down, just chill out for a little while, and then eventually go back to LA. And that didn't happen, because not that long after I was there, I met a woman named Fanya, and we hit it off, and she got impregnated by me. And that's where my first son, Bams, came into the picture. Bams was born with a genetic syndrome called CHARGE, which is an acronym, and it stands for this: coloboma of the eye, heart defects, atresia of the nasal choanae, retardation of growth development, genital urinary abnormalities, and ear abnormalities. So that was something that was not uncovered during the pregnancy at any kind of doctor's appointments or anything. It just became apparent something was off, when he was born. So by the time he had heart surgery immediately after he was born. He had numerous throat surgeries, couple hernia operations. He got a cochlear implant at one point in one ear. He ended up total by the end with 13 different operations, and he was in the hospital a lot. And he would do this thing, and I guess you would call it a seizure. I don't know. That's all I can think of it as. I don't know if we ever officially determined that's what it was, but he would just stop breathing. And you would look over, and he would be turning blue, and he'd be biting on his tongue and just not be breathing, and his body would be tense, and then it would just be limp. And it was the scariest goddamn thing, to deal with. And it happened. You didn't really, I couldn't tell when it was going to happen, but it was just one of those things you had to expect to happen. Sometimes it would happen at night when we were asleep, and something would jar you up, and you would be trying to get him out of it. And it wasn't really like CPR. It was trying to sort of just snap him out of it. And so that would be, not shaking him, but kind of just jostling him, trying to get him to get out of it. And, we always had oxygen tanks just at the ready. He slept with oxygen, and yeah, I don't know, man. It was scary. And I think when he was 7, he passed away, right? And I think that one day, I think it was just too much. I think his body at that point had been through too much, and it just couldn't sustain it anymore. And he left, the thing about here's here's how I think about BAMs, though. I think that some stars that you see are shining so bright and so powerfully that they can't maintain it. And that was him, because he was a star that lit up every room he was in. And he had, if you ever get a chance, listen to this song called Friendly, Friendly World. It's an old song. And BAMs did not see the world as a negative, scary place. Everything was great to him. And he laughed, and he loved to cuddle and wrestle and be with his siblings and be with his mom. And, I used to take him just random. I mean, I could put him in a stroller and we would walk, literally all day Saturday. And he would just roll. He was just down, just wanted to go. And he was funny, and he had his own way of communicating because he was deaf and he didn't talk. But, he had a way of getting his point across. And, he was just, he was beautiful, man. And people lit up when they met him and when they saw him. And, I don't know if this is politically correct or if I'm reading situations right, or maybe it's just myself, but sometimes when people are afflicted with things, whether it be down or, anything, people act differently, I think. Or maybe they're even weirded out and they're uncomfortable, and I think that's normal. Very few people had that reaction to him. He just had this gleam in his eye, especially when he had his little half crooked smile and his little giggly little squeal, and he's walking, just looking around, looking at everything, he's on a permanent acid trip or something, man. And I think because of that, he was able to put people's fears or just being uncomfortable. He was able, I think, to kind of wash that away, just purely on his personality. And his mom, I could do a whole episode on her too, because her name is Fania. She was absolutely amazing, and she gave me chances, because I would screw up, and she would, she didn't just lie there and let me roll over and run over. And no, she was very firm and very fair, and she has 3 other kids who are, every single one of them is into sports, and she's at every practice, every game, right there with Bams, cheering them on louder than everybody, dealing with the hardness of doing it by herself because we weren't together. We weren't dating or anything like that. She did it all, and she's, all respect to everybody, but she was one of the best moms there is. And really, any mom is the best mom, but I give her a ton of credit. So like I was saying, when Bams died, I got out of Boise, and I got here to Portland, where I've got family, sisters, and my dad, and my mom lives not too far from Portland at the time. And this was a good move for me, but I was still drinking a lot, and that's all I really wanted to do. I was able to work, because that's what us functioning alcoholics do. We're able to maintain a job and go about our business, but everything is about the drink. That's the goal. The whole reason you go to work is to get the check so you can drink after you get it. And that's all I did. And I drank, like I was saying, I'm somebody that liked the drink a lot anyways. But dealing with the death of my son, that was really 2 things there. I was drinking to deal with the death, and I was using the death as an excuse to drink more. I came up with that. Like, hey, man, I can drink all the whiskey I want. My son just died. And then it was, it was a really bad time. And I made it bad for people, too, that had to sit and watch me do that when I'm not really trying to get any help. I'm not trying to get help from them, really, aside from talking about him every once in a while. I was content to just drink until I died. And wasn't happening. So anyways, yeah, so, obviously that's a pretty dark period of my life, and I snapped out of it, luckily, thanks to Laura and McConey and now Che, and Laura's family and my family. I mean, there was everybody helped me get through that, and I think made me a better person for it. Anyways, so that's kind of what brings us to this point where I'm at now, which is living in Portland and with my little squad and working right around the corner at a place called Outside Van. If you're ever in the market for a customized Mercedes Sprinter van, make sure you hit them up. Tell them G from Receiving sent you. But to get on to this podcast now, and the reason I'm doing it, throughout my life, I have dabbled in many things. This is this kind of double-edged sword that I have, where just about anything I've been interested in, I dabbled in. So Kobe and me recorded music. We did hip hop. I actually got to do some shows. We actually had pretty decent stuff. I still write rhymes to this day. I just wrote one while I was sitting in my car 2 days ago, I think. Because I've loved hip hop. I've always loved it. But it's never something I thought of as a career path. When I lived in LA, I did some acting. I did a couple things. I did the biggest thing was an Andrew Jackson documentary where I was a Choctaw warrior and I had a big fight scene, and I got probably a good minute of screen time, but I made a lot of money for that. I've done, okay, I'm calling it acting. It's pretty much extra work. But, I was on Portlandia. I was on The Librarians. I was on a show called Stadies, which didn't get picked up. I auditioned for a TV show, and that was in pre-production to play a kind of a henchman. And they liked the audition so much that they gave me the part, and then they were going to beef the role up. They were going to make it a bigger role because they liked what I did with it. And then funding fell out, and they didn't end up making the show. So, so it's another thing. Acting, dabbled in it, done a little of it, went to acting school. Along those lines, have started to write screenplays, and I used to make short films that I wish I still had copies of now because they were, they were okay. But I just liked being behind the camera directing. So, and to continue on with that, mixed martial arts, like I was talking about with Kenji, I had 6 amateur fights and then the 1 pro fight that I lost. And I was doing okay. I was training a lot, and I lost a lot of weight, and it was something I was interested in, but not really at making a career of it. It's just something I dabbled in because it looked fun. Same with wrestling, pro wrestling. I never actually had a match, but I did go to pro wrestling school for quite a few weekends in a row, and I was showing promise, and then I just backed out. So, what the point I'm trying to make with this is that I don't think I'm afraid to try new things, but I am sort of afraid to see them through as far as they can go. And the reasons are varied, but they're not really reasons. They're probably excuses that I came up with. But I forgot to mention the children's book that I wrote about Lucha Libre. And it was a book that it was all written in rhyme form. And there was 2 parts. There was the front part, which it tells the story of this one match. And there's a wrestler obsessed with gold. So he wants to beat the champion because the champion's got the big gold belt. And so the first half of the book is written from the bad guy's perspective, coming after the gold belt. And then you flip the book over, and it's written from the good guy's perspective, trying to protect and defend his belt. And I wrote it. I finished the whole thing. Like I said, all in rhyme, and I was pretty proud of it. And I read it to some coworkers, and it got a pretty good reaction. So what happened is I emailed some literary agents and said, I got this book, and this is what I want to do, and I'd like to see it illustrated. Here's a sample. I emailed probably 10. Never heard anything back. The pro wrestling school, there was a guy at the school I didn't like, so I quit. Acting, I never really sunk my teeth into that deeply. So all these stuff I've tried, I've never really finished any of them. And the documentary was the next one. And I got very far into this documentary. I wrote a whole synopsis, and I emailed people at PBS, and I got a response from them, and I emailed another native filmmaker in the area in Portland here, and kind of talked to him a little bit about it, and communication fell off there, and actually emailed the guy that had cast me in the show about it, and he was interested. But see, all this stuff kind of just never happened, and so I just shelved it. And it's kind of like that's what I do, at the first sign of any kind of rough patch, I kind of just bail on it. And the documentary was sort of the latest example of that. And the podcast idea came about, and I said I could see that through, because then I'm not worried about a producer or a literary agent or money, whatever. This is something I can just do myself, and I just have to worry about the guests, which, is interesting about this week, having not been able to get guests in time. And I almost said, well, I guess I'm not doing one this week. And then I said, no, just do one. Just put one out. That doesn't have to stop you. So the podcast is the most motivated I've been to see something through since the documentary, my latest sort of incarnation of the documentary, or docu-series, as it were. I guess that's what it ended up becoming. But yeah, I was really kind of bumming out this afternoon, like, man. And so I just kind of said, no, I'm not doing it this time. So that's why you're listening to me talk about myself this week and not somebody interesting. So that's kind of where we're at right now. I mean, this podcast so far has been getting good responses, and the number of plays is, I think, at 140 or something, maybe 130 for the 3 episodes, which is, not going to make me a millionaire, but that means people are listening to it. And that's more people than I think I've told about it, or that like my Facebook page. So somebody out there, some people have been listening, and that's what I'm happy about. And, because if you put out something, if you are creating content for the internet, your people are going to watch it because your people are supporting you. And at least you hope, anyway. But I think it's the bigger audience you want to reach, the people that don't know you. If you can win over the people that don't know you, then I think you have something, to work off of. So I think I'm happy with the number of plays. I'm happy with the fact that, there's people at work that I don't talk to a whole lot, and it's nothing against them. It's kind of just how I am at work. A jerk, cold, I've been told, and agree with. But having people that, I haven't spent a ton of time talking to or interacting with coming up saying they've listened to all the episodes, all 3 episodes, when's the next one coming out? Like, that shit is so cool to me. And that also keeps me excited that people want to hear it, and they want to hear the next one, and that that kind of says maybe you are on the right track. And don't get discouraged because the people you emailed didn't write back. Find somebody else to email. Go a different route. Like, that's where I'm at with that. And I used to think that, and I still do to agree, I used to think my ideas didn't get made because I didn't know the right people. And if I just knew the right people, then somebody could connect the dots for me. And I still agree with that to an extent, but I think that I wanted people to connect the dots, and I put the dots way too far apart. So I'm willing to do a little more of this myself. Connect the dots, put the dots closer together, get a better picture, and number the dots. Since I'm on a connect the dots analogy, and just make it so, if someone does come along that can help, I'm not relying on them for everything, that I can do some of this myself. So anyway, that is where I am at with the podcast. That is who I am. And that's the gist of it. And there's still a lot I want to do. And, some of the ideas I had for when this was going to be a TV show, these are things I still want to talk about, and I still think I can find people to talk about with. And there's a tribe in Colorado called the Utes that's worth over $1 billion because of their I think natural gas and coal resources. And then of course not too far away from there is the Pine Ridge Reservation, which is one of the poorest counties in the whole country. And of course that's where everything that happened with Leonard Peltier went down. And Leonard Peltier is a whole episode to itself also, but the gist of his story is he was arrested and convicted on murdering 2 FBI agents, and there seems to be a lot of evidence pointing to the fact that it wasn't him. And there's a lot of people out there that believe he is falsely imprisoned and is probably going to die in prison because he's being made an example of. But again, that's a whole nother episode. I'm pretty passionate about that one too. But I know he's got a nephew that lives around here somewhere. So, but anyways, of course, I wanted to talk about the mascot issue, the Redskins, the Indians, the Braves, and are those disrespectful, or should we just be looking past that and that they're just teams? I don't know. That one I'm a little conflicted on. And then the Meskwaki tribe was the tribe opposing the Dakota Access Pipeline. They were involved with the protests and all that. I wanted to talk about that. And then the casino, the tribal gaming thing, and how our current president, Donald Trump, was big time against tribal gaming up in New Jersey area because he was trying to do his own casino at the time, and he did a lot to try and prevent the tribe from operating a casino up there. My tribe has a casino. There's a casino not too far from here called Island A. That's the Cowlitz tribe. I want to talk about that. And I want to talk about the things in the native tribes that you don't always hear about. Not that you hear about a lot of this other stuff, but across the board, teen suicide and violence against children and women and diabetes and substance abuse, missing indigenous women. Across the board, those things are higher in native communities and on reservations. And, why the hell is that? And is that because are these things you can trace back all the way back to the early treaties and people coming over from Ireland and Europe, and does this go all the way back? Is this like an ongoing process that is just eliminating us? So that one is pretty serious, and I hope I can get somebody really knowledgeable for that episode because there's a lot going on there. So there we go. There's a little overview of who I am and what this podcast is about and why I want to do it. And I want to thank you for listening. If you've listened to all 3 or if you've listened to some, or I don't care. I appreciate everybody listening and being supportive and continuing to inspire me to keep moving forward. Because I am very excited about this project, and I'm finding the motivation to keep going. So thank you very much. Sorry for being the only one on this week, but I think next week you will find some very interesting, stimulating conversation about a subject to be determined. So thank you for listening. Have a good night. I'll talk to you later.